Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Purpose People podcast. I have Sara with me from Brave. I always smile when I say Brave because I know the journey that we went on together in terms of telling that story. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming along and being
You're
on
welcome.
our podcast. We're going to talk about your journey, the content, being brave, obviously.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really sticks out for me in terms of what you do is you help companies deal with difficult conversations.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about what difficult conversations mean and how you impact? And then we'll explore all the other stuff after.
Yeah, a great first question. Great first question. Well, kind of We Are Brave was born out of frustration, I think, more than anything. And the frustration was sort of in two arms. One was hearing the people we worked with all the time talking about, I can't say that. I can't have that conversation, in a corporate sense.
Yeah.
Saying those kind of words like, oh, well, how would I say that? Or, yeah, but I'm not allowed to say that, or whatever it might be around those kind of just more challenging conversations, be it I've got to give some feedback to somebody, or I've just got to raise a topic that I find really difficult, or I'm just really fed up with this and I want to raise it. So that's the kind of difficult conversation stuff. And then the kind of more personal side for myself and Rhiannon, who is the co-owner of We Are Brave, was just noticing around us that more polarizing effect that we've got going on in the world around, if I have a different opinion to yours, if I disagree with you on a topic, does that mean we may never have a conversation that allows us to
really
discuss?
Cool.
So two arms that came together kind of at the same time, really, for us. So
and that's kind of what I've seen in the world is just from you sometimes you take yourself out and you look at social media, and you look at the media, and you look at the news, and you go, if your narrative doesn't fit somebody else's, it's almost like someone's got to be right and the other person has got to be wrong. And it's very polarizing. It's like we've turned into this binary society where everyone's got to be one way or the other. And if you're not there's no middle ground where we can have a conversation, which is what your business does, is it creates that middle ground to have those conversations. And so I look at it and I go, wow, if you can do that in a business that allow people to have those difficult conversations, that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, we believe so. And I will put a tiny bit of context on what we do, which is that, what we're not talking about is the sharing of opinions that have, at their root an oppression or a denial of, kind of people's rights. What we're talking about is, oh God, I just need to talk to you about this thing and I can't get through it. Or, oh, I'm interested in that. So let's have a conversation around, you see that really differently to me. And rather than, like you said, it be polarizing, it means we don't like each other. Isn't it interesting to have a conversation that's expansive?
Yeah, well, the thing is, if you're working in teams, and that's when you do a lot of work with corporate companies and stuff. So if you're working in teams, it's often a difference of opinion where the clashes happen. But sometimes it can be as simple as you're just climbing up the same mountain from a different side.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Someone's going up the north side, the other's going up the south side. You both got the same goal, but you've got different opinions. And I think for me, it's the whole values thing, that you can celebrate different personalities if you've got a core set of values.
Yes.
And I don't think not everyone has made that connection. That it's like, well, everyone's got to be this way. To work here, you've all got to be like super hard, super fast or whatever. And it's like, well, no. You need all personalities. But the thing that brings you together is values. And if one of them is communication, if you can double down on that and give the people the ability to have open conversation and explore ideas, you will then remove this echo chamber.
Yes. Yeah. And it's where the magic happens, right? That kind of... and what we try to do is equip people to do that, is equip people with the skills, a bit of the discipline, a bit of the structure to have that conversation. And then when you support people in that way, and groups, decision-making groups in that way, there's magic in there. Suddenly it doesn't become about a combative conversation. It becomes about exploration and more ideas taking shape. And wow, look at where we went through all of that unknown to get to this huge discovery at the other end. And the huge discovery doesn't have to be, something, technologically advanced. It can just be, oh, that's what we need to do next.
Yeah.
That's the next step that we take.
Yeah.
And we love it. We absolutely love it. Seeing that magic happen in a room, be it 4 people in a startup or 20 people in a corporate, suddenly we're having these conversations and more gets released as a result of it. And that's the magic.
So I read a book over the pandemic called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. Have you read that?
I know him. I've not read the book.
So Rebel Ideas talks about the fact is that the diversity in conversations allow us to come up with much better ideas. And he uses an example about, it's controversial, but of Osama bin Laden. So the CIA is full of middle-aged white guys. They see the video of Osama bin Laden, and collectively they all come to that conclusion. It's just a guy in a cave, dressed badly, just ignore him. Obviously, we know the story, what actually happened. But in the Middle East, the fact that he was speaking in a cave, the fact that he was quoting poetry, the fact of the clothes that he was wearing, in the Middle East, they saw him as a higher top of the tree prophet. But because the diverse of thinking was quite limited, middle white guys that probably never even looked into anything in the Middle East, they jumped to the wrong conclusion. So now the CIA now have people from in certain areas from all countries represented, so they don't miss something as heinous as that. And that's an extreme example, but it goes back to, if you don't allow conversation from diverse voices, you end up making really bad decisions.
Yeah, I think that's hugely critical, and it's the output that we work towards is just well-informed decision making.
Yeah.
That's it. How you inform that, who you get in the room to inform that, those are all choices that you make, but it's well-informed decision making, not echo chamber, like you say, or whatever, whatever equivalent you might have. And it's just, I think there's something really exciting in that. It changes from being terrified of having the disagreement or having the conversation into, oh wow, okay, that was so much easier. It wasn't comfortable, and I think that's the bit that we have to get really okay with. We've got to get uncomfortable. Got to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. That's Lovey Ajayi Jones. She talks about that all the time, which is get comfortable with the discomfort. Because that's where it starts to move. That's where it starts to change.
Yeah, and I think certainly even doing the podcast stuff, when we first did it, it was uncomfortable to be in front of the camera rather than hiding behind it.
Yeah,
but the conversations that it's provoked, the reach and the impact that it's had far surpass how I feel. So it's good for me to be uncomfortable because there's an impact behind what we're going to do. And I think that person who's quiet, that never says anything in the team, and you give them a platform to speak, they could change your business overnight or change the situation overnight, because finally you've given them that ability to say, and what do you want to say? And maybe no one's ever asked them because they're quiet. So I find that quite incredible. But Sara, tell me a little bit about your background, because you didn't always do this, or did you?
No, we didn't always do this. Or I didn't always do this. No, I would say I fell into my career. I didn't go to university. I got a job straight from A-levels. I didn't want to be in this country. I wanted to go back to Australia, which is where I'd kind of left.
Whereabouts?
West Australia in Perth. Yeah. So I left there at 17, didn't want to leave, kicking and screaming, coming back to the UK. So did my A-levels.
You came here for the weather, right? Is that why you came
Totally
here?
Came for the weather, exactly right. I got a job. I wanted to go back. I didn't want to be here. And so, a job turns into a career, and a career turns into, a life. And I took redundancy. I guess probably the pivotal moment for me was taking voluntary redundancy from a career and thinking, oh, okay, I can do a bit of this. Yeah. And this was public speaking training, doing a bit of leadership development, and then a fortuitous meeting with Rhiannon, who came back into my world and is now the co-director. And and then finding, our feet together as a partnership, and then really stepping into, the rebranding work that we did with you, really stepping into some of what we started to really hear, like I said, around people saying, I don't know how to do this, and having a real sense of, kind of a sense of purpose that was hidden a little bit until we did some work with you, which was these skill sets are critical life skills.
Yeah.
And, we want to not just use them within decision-making groups in corporates or in startups, but to use them in schools and out there in environments that wouldn't have the access to this stuff potentially. And so that really galvanized Rhea and I to come together and do something.
What I like about you both, Rhea and yourself, was that you were open to, or you gave us a platform to speak, as well. And I remember saying that thing because your company was called something else.
Yes.
It was called Well Prepared Training before.
Yeah.
And you were talking about, you got this desire for all your material to really come to the forefront. And then I had that thing of saying, why don't you be brave? And there was part of me that going, I can't say this, but I've got to say it. Do you know what I mean? But the environment that you created allowed me to say something like that. Does that make sense? And whether you realized it or not, that's what it felt like. It felt like, you know what? You got permission to be difficult. And it's not being confrontational, but it was just to say something that could either have gone one or two ways. But it was like when you both, I remember you both going quiet and then you like going, yeah, it hit and you went, you know what, that is us and we need to be.
Yeah.
And I think for me that was just having worked with you in a workshop environment. You created that environment for allow us to do that.
Oh, thank you.
And I think we saw essentially the people that you are as humans allow the platform for those difficult conversations to have it and feel that there was no judgment or no pushback or no, this is the way we're going. It was like, no, we're open. We're here to learn. And I, as I said, every time I hear the name Brave as a company or it comes up in our meetings or whatever, I always smile because that's you living it. You were brave.
Yeah, I find that's really lovely. Thank you. That's really lovely to hear. I think it kind of reminds me as well. I think for me, when I was, growing up, for me, disagreement meant you fell out.
Right,
disagreement felt like an argument or you were upsetting someone.
Yeah.
And so my skills that I built over the years of corporate and all the rest of it was I can build agreement, I can build common ground really quickly.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of those things, but it started to feel like a false harmony for me. And so one of the things that I know I can look back and join the dots with is knowing how to build agreement doesn't necessarily always build the environment for disagreement. And so to build the environment for disagreement is very different. It's very conscious. And it's lovely to hear that you think Rhea and I do that.
Yeah.
We do it together. That's how we build our business. But we do it because we know it gives us better ideas, right, as a result.
Yeah.
So it's good. Thank you for that. It's great.
No, we had a conversation. I won't go into the detail, but one of the things that come up was that, the old elephant in the room conversation where there's an elephant in the room and no one's talking about it. But me and my wife were in a conversation and that come up and we said, well, there's no elephant because we've dealt with this. But what we've realized is we will never have agreement on this conversation. We never get there. We respect each other as people and we'll talk whatever, but that subject we're just not going to agree on. So can we move forward? Because it was almost like, well, I feel it's my responsibility. And it was like, well, hang on a second. It's more about, there's no elephant in the room. We've had the conversation. We just realized we come from two different worlds, different ways of doing life. But it doesn't mean we didn't have a relationship. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the key thing is that when you have those difficult conversations that you can still have a relationship with people. You might not agree with everything that they do, for example. We homeschool our kids. Someone else says that's the maddest thing you could ever do. And someone else has got their kids in a private school or a school system. That doesn't mean I don't need to talk to you or I can't have a relationship with you. But in some cases that can be, I homeschool my kids and I'm never going to talk to anyone that doesn't. It's to be comfortable enough to say people do life differently and they don't have to do it the same, but we can find common ground. I love that you find common ground with people very quickly. It's really good.
I moved a lot when I was a kid as well. So there's kind of, I sort of had to, I either had to lose the weird accent or, kind of get up to speed with the TV.
Did you get told that you were from Essex at all?
No.
Because I did.
Did you?
So I'm not from Australia, but I was from Essex. So I moved to Bristol and everyone thought it was Australian.
There you go.
And Neighbours, can you remember Neighbours?
Yes, of course.
Neighbours had kicked in. So I was walking around the whole school and everyone was going, "G'day, mate." I was like, what? They all thought it was straight. I'm from Essex.
I love that. It is about the sound. Maybe there is a sound.
So now you know that if you think about it, and I obviously not living around people from Essex, occasionally I hear someone and I go, "Oh, now I know what they're talking about now."
You can hear it.
You can hear
it's
the
interesting.
twang. So it's quite crazy. Yeah, but the point is finding common ground with people very quickly. That is an absolute skill.
It is, definitely. And, part of what part of the skills we give people is finding that, is being able in a disagreement to find the agreement. That's as critical as being able to isolate the disagreement, because often what we do in groups in particular is we go through constant loops of decision making because we haven't isolated, well, we agree on that. We don't need to talk about that anymore. Let's spend time on the thing that we actually do disagree on and figure out a route forward. Now, in decision making groups, you have to move forward, right? You have to know that moment where you've got to make the decision.
Yeah.
And that's also critical. When do we go from the discussion to the decision?
So one of the things you said is you talked about the difficult conversation is from the essentially you used it as there's a decision that comes out of the result of disagreement. And so you start off with disagreement and you move into a decision and there's a journey to travel in between the two.
Yeah.
So how do someone that disagrees move forward in agreement to the decision? As in, they might have an opinion, but they're happy to roll with a decision out. How does that work? Yeah,
well, I think you've kind of summarised it actually brilliantly. So, my whole business summarised in it. But I think that is true. I think so. We work with sort of 4 pillars, I guess, within our program. Which, the journey to disagreement starts earlier than that. It starts with how you take responsibility for yourself, showing up in the room.
Yeah.
And so, generally, most conversations that have a disagreement within them or the potential for disagreement within them don't go well if there isn't some consideration to what you bring into the room.
Yeah.
Doing them on the fly, catching people by surprise, they tend to go less well. If the conversation isn't kind of as easy. So the journey to disagreement is first point with you. How do you show up? What's your thinking coming in? How are you going to speak in that room that encourages people to listen to you? And also, how are you going to be quiet in that room? Your point earlier of what about the other voice that doesn't get heard, or just how are you going to show up and listen with curiosity? What questions are you going to ask in that room? Because if you come in with the position of I just need to win, then that's not a disagreement. That's just an outright kind of combative, it could be negotiation if you're willing to give on things, but if you're coming in to win, then that's not what we're talking about.
Well, you've already made the decision, right? And you're just ticking the boxes. Well, I've made the decision. We'll sit in the room. I'll listen to all of you, but we're going to do it anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So thanks ever so much for your time, but we're going to do what I thought we were going to do. The minute I walked in, and people feel that, right? They know it in a conversation. It's like, well, you're just literally paying lip service to what I have to say. So it is about how you show up. It is about then how you contribute and how you allow others to, and what you do in that room to really encourage that to happen.
Yeah.
And then it's about that personal quality check of, okay, how am I feeling? Am I uncomfortable? Am I trying to win here? Am I trying to, put someone else down in order to kind of overcome that? And so we teach all of these skills, we give all of these tools and techniques. But you're absolutely right. There is a point where the discussion is done.
Yeah.
Where the disagreement to the best of your ability has been had.
Yeah.
And so then what we also help people with is how do you make that decision? Knowing when you're ready to make it and knowing in the room how you're going to make that.
Yeah.
Are you going to make it fast? Is it somebody's responsibility? Is it just on one person? And are they now well informed to make that decision?
Yeah.
Or do you need to make it collectively? And what does that look like? How do you get 6 voices to agree on the decision? But you are right. Part of it is line up. Part of it is get behind it.
It is. And I think where I probably, and I do say this to a lot of people that are in business leadership or whatever, run a sports team. Even if you do it for one season, or be part of a sports team, but more of the management necessary playing. Why I say that is because there's a certain way of playing. Like you play for a football team, they might have a certain style of playing. every player has its own preference, because they want to shine. They want to be the superstar. But for a team to win, it's almost like you've got to think of the collective. And if you can educate the collective, the team players you might not have the most skillful players in the team as a result of it, because it just doesn't work. So you might accommodate everything for this one superstar player, and certainly at an amateur level, they play 3 games and then choose to leave and go and play for someone else. And then you've upset the entire team. So I think with sport, it gives you the ability to say, well, look, this is a pattern of play. This is the way that we're going to do it. You're going to have to maybe line up, and to be in the lineup, you're going to have to line up. And you might not play in the way that you want to play, but give it time, you might see this whole thing differently.
Yeah.
And I think I've always said this statement, time tells. And I think that it's to build enough conversation where there's enough trust that although I disagree, I'm willing to try it.
Yes,
to see
absolutely.
how and you might find that actually you might have been a right winger and now you're playing right back, but actually you find out I've had my best season playing in that position. But there is that degree of trust, isn't there, that you have to get into. I think sport's a great way of doing it.
Yeah, I think I can't meet you with the football analogy, but absolutely the principle behind what you're describing is, if we are to line up, then what there needs to have been to genuinely line up. To create commitment, not consensus, because that's what you want. You can't always get consensus. What you want is commitment.
Yeah.
And to have had commitment, you're generally going to have needed to be in a position where you have spoken up, been heard, and feel as though that's taken place, and then line up. It's the difference between lining up and not saying your piece, and then afterwards saying, "See, told you so." That's not what we're talking about. And what we don't talk about in our tools and our techniques is we don't want a load of people just moaning for the sake of moaning. It's not about that. It's about, if you've got something to say, let's create the environment where you can say it, and we can learn from that and inform the decision.
Yeah, 100%.
And if we don't agree with you, okay, that's great, but we've had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And I think for me, there are, like, for instance, I talk football, for example, but let's say you're on a sailing boat trying to win the championship of sail around the world and win that title. Everyone's got to be in agreement. There's going to be casualties.
Yes.
You might not like the fact that you've got to do this, or you're winding in when you want to be doing this, or whatever, but at some point you have to move forward, because if we're not in agreement, there's going to be casualties. And I think in business, it's casualties of clients, potentially casualties of people whereby they go, well, they're talking to the client, and then they go, oh, well, I was not in agreement anyway. And you just created this disunity, and then the client gets like, well, why am I finding this out, that you're not all on the same page? So it creates that distrust, that insecurity, and ultimately you can lose a client as a result of it. So I think for me, I love the things of what you're saying, where you're talking about commitment and not they're great tools to help people realize that you can move forward and not be in agreement.
Yeah. And it's okay to be uncomfortable with all of it.
Yeah.
And in the moment, the thing you're saying around, well, I told you so, or I was never behind it, in the first place. Well, let's have that conversation now then.
Yes.
Let's talk about, well, what was it that meant in that moment 6 months ago, whenever it was, you couldn't speak up?
Yeah.
Right, let's talk about it now so that it doesn't happen again. And I think, all of that is not easy. It is harder to do, but hard things are hard, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm quoting Barack Obama, I think, on that. But hard things are hard, so let's not pretend that they should be easy. They will require some determination and some discipline to get through. And that's kind of.
Do you think, though, when that happens, do you think sometimes, when you go, okay, over to you, that they haven't formulated their thoughts?
Yes.
A lot of the time, where they've made a lot of assumptions and not really explored it, but they've really come at it from, well, how's it affect me in the immediacy?
Yes.
And not thought it through. Do you find that a lot? Yeah,
I think that's the exactly the spot there, which is to have, if we know we need to have this conversation, the elephant in the room, whatever you want to talk about, if somebody hasn't turned up with their thinking, let's talk about what that is and why that's happened, and then the impact of that. So if you're really critical to the conversation in the room, Daryl, maybe you and I are talking about it, and your input's really critical, well, what do we do with that? Do we go forward not having your full commitment and your full, not commitment, your full contribution, or do we pause?
Yeah.
And give you back the responsibility of going away and being more clear about what you want to show up with and what you want to say, because that will be better for us if we do that. Now, time, there's a time factor to that, which isn't always, available to us.
You've got to make a decision at the end of the day.
But it's still a decision, right? We decide to go forward without your contribution, and therefore we are acknowledging we're less informed, or we say no and we come back to this once you've had a chance to think. And so all of those are available, I think.
No, but I because that's my thing. I found in oftentimes where you can't move forward in agreement, that it's very easy to take a gun and try and criticize everyone and shoot everything down. But it's actually, well, what's your standpoint? Have you thought that through?
Yes.
If it was you, what would you do? Would you have what? And I think for me, I don't know whether it's through age or experience or whatever, but I always try, and maybe it's because I'm in marketing, you always have to understand the audience. So you're always putting yourself in that other person's shoes and thinking it through and saying, well, if I was coming at it from this way, how would it work, or how would it might go? And I don't think enough people do that. I don't think they put themselves in the shoes. It's just they put themselves in their own shoes, but they never put themselves in another person's shoes.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, they should know. Well, you've never communicated. And how can they know the other person's shoes? They might have an idea, but actually have the conversation to be in someone else's shoes.
Exactly. Question to understand, not question to undermine, and that's really, that's a skill, right? Because the same question can sound either of those.
Yes.
I can
to
sound
the wrong
like
personality,
or how you deliver it. How we all know that. We know that element of tone and delivery is a huge part of how we communicate. So, what am I doing in the room to understand? Either by empathizing with you or by asking you to show up and speak up.
Yeah.
For it, whichever way around it is. But we recognize we all believe we are really, really skilled in listening and questioning. And then we often get in a room and for some reason, because we're disagreeing, we lose that ability. Yeah. We get very wedded to our point of view.
100%.
And we don't necessarily explore it. And for us, it's about debate the idea, not the person. Debate the thing that's in front of you, put it in the middle of you, literally write it on a piece of paper and put it in between you so that you are looking at it, not at each other.
Yeah, that's great.
And that then separates the need for it to feel as more uncomfortable. It's always going to feel uncomfortable, but it removes that real sense of you're putting me on the spot versus, okay, what else can we talk about here?
Yeah, it's that thing of isolation. Like when you put that thing on there, it's there. It's a thing that can be resolved, and it also gives perspective.
Yes,
because that can just be like one thing, but everything else around it's working. It's just this one thing. But I like the fact that you write it out and physically put it there, because if you don't, it's like you're viewing everything through that one thing that's not right.
Yes, and I'm looking at you whilst we're talking about it. So I'm literally looking at the human that's presenting this idea. And also I think that not only separates, the thing between us, it also maybe detaches it, like you said, the perspective, it detaches it from me.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're not having a go at me and I'm not failing or getting it wrong because we're not comfortable with getting it wrong.
Yeah.
We're hugely uncomfortable with being wrong about things. So suddenly I've detached it from me. Yeah. And I'm no longer wrong. I'm just, okay, my perspective is different.
And that's often what I have to find is that sometimes when I get that, if I ever get kicked back, I have to try and show them what I've said may be right, and maybe I haven't communicated the perspective enough.
Yes.
So then I have to give the perspective and say, well, if we don't do these things, the knock-on effect is this. So, and that's, again, it's like that's coming from years of experience in that particular area. So it's like, well, the reason why I'm being hard on this is because if we get that right, it's going to fix this, this, this. And they may not have gone that far in their thought process to come to that conclusion.
And it's your job in the leadership position to share that. Otherwise, how else would people know that? Yeah. And now they know that. Well, they still might have a difference of opinion to you, but at least you know it's fully formed. It's as well formed as it can be.
Exactly. And it goes back to communication as well. You know, like you can sometimes give room for the reaction.
Yes.
And not get offended with it. You just have to the room for the push of the button, and then watch them go, and then okay, I'm not gonna fight back, and then let it sink, because I think that's a skill in itself as well. Learn to be slapped round the face, and then you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna wait, and then we keep going, and eventually. And listen, I'm not going to wait for an apology because you might not ever get one, but at least now you've got perspective.
Yeah,
and that's what for me. It's sometimes. The thing is, often when we're making decisions, it's a lack of perspective. But I think as leaders, we don't take enough time to give people the perspective that they need. We almost assume that they should see it the way that you see it. And I think I've had to learn. And sometimes I'm great with it. Other days I'm tired and I don't always allow room for it. But I think as a leader, I think that's something I have to do a lot, is give perspective all the time. See it this way, see it this way, see it this way, rather than as in your own little box.
I think it's great that you think it, right? Because if you're thinking it, means you're more likely to do that. And, you're using the word perspective, in our wider team, we talk about context, someone that works with us says, give me the context, and so that, and sometimes you miss it and you give that. And I think it's being as well informed as you can be in any given conversation, and well informed comes from more voices in it, and not voices, like I said earlier, of moaning and just speaking to dominate, but it's tell me your perspective, tell me your context, what are you bringing into the room that's different. And I love the Glennon Doyle, who's written the book Untamed. She has a podcast as well that I listen to. They have an expression which I love, which is they have strong opinions loosely held.
Yeah, that's good.
Which I love, and it's very different to the world that, like I said, I grew up in, which is strong opinions, very tightly gripped onto, which meant that if you were disagreed, it was an argument. Whereas strong opinions loosely held means, okay, here's mine, and where are yours? And I'm willing for that to be moved. There are some things that are absolutes, and we can't get around those. Whatever industry you work in, there will be absolutes. There'll be law, there'll be regulation, there'll be, moral judgments that you bring to that. But there's a lot that can be loosely held, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it's a case of you've always got, it goes back using the word that you said, you look at the context of the journey, or the context of the relationship, or where you want to take things. And sometimes there is a bit of pain involved, and we can't mitigate that. We're going to have to make those decisions. When we made the decision to go fully remote, the main driver is we're spending money per month, every month, which is a cost to the business, and no one's using it. Mm-hmm. So on paper, the decision really does you can't get away from that. Okay, I'll use it a bit more, but then you're going to revert back to type, which is convenient, and work from home. So, when you find like 2 people out of like a staff with freelancers, like 14 people, then all of a sudden it's like, well, there's no need for it. Can we do our job? Yeah. Now, the thing that we have to do is we have to still create human connection and still meet up and connect. And again, we're going to have to change and stuff like that. But having left it for 6 months, it's like, the decision really makes itself now. I could have been impulsive and said, oh, that's it, let's do it in January. I thought, no, let's see if it changes. And it hasn't. In fact, it got worse. So it's like, well, I don't want to be the dictatorial person. You must all turn up to the office, because I don't. I don't want to drive to Bristol and queue in traffic and find part. It just drives me nuts. Yet, to not have that, to put that on the other people, let them come to their own conclusion. But at some point, someone's got to make a decision. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's really clear, in a business sense, corporate, startup, that sometimes that decision making is really clear. This is yours, Daryl. Yeah. This is your decision. And you have allowed for the space for the conversation or the data to appear. Yeah. That's all of that is okay. And what you described there is another thing we talk about, which is fast and slow decision making.
I agree. Yeah,
because sometimes it needs to be fast, and it can be, but we get addicted to making decisions quickly. We
Agreed.
get addicted to the speed. I think you talked about this with Danny Morris,
Yeah.
actually, in your other conversation about that need to move from idea to solution with speed and not taking the time maybe to find other context or other information. And it's okay. Fast decision making is great, and we give people tools to do that.
That's a curse of a founder.
Yes.
They want to change the world. They want to do it now,
Yeah.
you know, and then you're always making fast. And I've had to learn that actually slow can be better.
Slow is often needed for all of the reasons. But slow feels uncomfortable. Slow feels wrong, maybe, in whatever word, you know, however you want to take that word. But being okay as a decision-making group or as a leader in that group to say this one needs to slow down.
Yeah.
We need to take more time, or we need to do something different. This one, let's do it. You know, we've got this. Let's take the consequences of either. Let's be okay with the consequences of either.
Yeah, because slow may cost money, which obviously it has. It's cost more money over a period of time. Which, in the heat of a battle, I can make decisions fairly quickly. But I've learnt the power of slowing down now.
Yeah, and it's how you make them, right?
I guess it's maybe an older thing, maybe.
Maybe,
older,
or it's being...
Or experience. You start putting on, hang on a minute, let's ask a few more questions. Maybe it's age, I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably all of those things and none of them at the same time. You know, it's probably... But it's being aware of your habits, I think, in the decision-making.
Yeah.
You know, as a group, you will have a set of habits. As a group, you will have a dynamic that takes you to a place with both all of the things we've talked about, how you speak up in the room together, how you disagree well or not in a room together, how you make decisions together. You will have habits, a group dynamic.
Yeah.
And what we offer are tools to offer you a different route. Yeah. And it's often for me, I was talking to Ree obviously before we came today, and we were talking about that. It's the moment the external change matches the internal change that you're trying to make, the internal skills that you have, the internal experience that you have, suddenly matches that external moment where you've got to either make the change, make the decision, whatever it is, and those two things coalesce. And that's magic. You know, we help people with the internal bit. Yeah. How do you approach this? What are your skills? What structures do you use to help you in a room with people? And then when the moment the external decision comes or the external change happens, you're ready. And that's the magic that comes together, be it in a startup, be it in a corporate, be it in your personal life, whatever it is, those two things combine.
So Brave, obviously the name of your company, and the strapline is directing change.
Yes.
Because obviously, what would you say? Do you prescribe to the basis of people don't like change, or is it the way that people are communicated with change is where the problem lies?
Oh, huge question. I think that, take both of those. Communication, yes. I'll answer probably what I think is the easier one straight away, which is...
There's no right or wrong answer.
Well, there's not, no.
Yeah.
Of course, communication is the thing, right? And I know you'll have heard versions of this, and I know that your listeners will hear this as well, which is you need to communicate. If there's a change, you can't just tell people once, because how many times do you hear someone say, "Well, I've told them."
Yeah,
it's like, well, they didn't hear it. There was awful lot going on, because of course it's communication, and there are thousands of books, I'm sure, out there telling you how to communicate through change, and we do our own, version of that. Do people like change? I think there's a scale between I cannot stand it, it makes me feel really uncomfortable, to the other end, which is, bring it on. I'm all day long, I love it. None of those are wrong. It's just what you're working in at the time. COVID forced us. We know the story of COVID. It forced us to change.
Massively.
And hindsight, using the whole Steve Jobs join the dots backwards statement. Wow, amazing. Would I have changed that to have happened, and all of the context aside of, what happened to people if they lost people, that's different. Yeah. But for me personally, no, it was astounding what happened in our business as a result of that. Yeah. But would you ask me up front, do you want 2 years of this ahead of you? Of course I'd have said no.
No, exactly. And I think for me, where I think is, I think people like change as long as it doesn't affect them. Does that make sense?
There's a cartoon,
we love change.
isn't
If I've
there?
got to move somewhere else, I've got to.
Yeah.
Because I generally have liked change over the years. But I mean, I remember we were in the throes of buying our previous house or whatever, and that all fell through, and then we ended up moving. That was painful.
Yeah.
You know, it was like at the worst possible time it all happened, and it was looking back now, we're in a much better place and a position, and hence in some degree it was a crisis, which is, you know, I was having to relive the book that I wrote again.
Yes.
You know, but I think some change for us is a surprise. And I think the best way we can help people on the change journey is try and not make it as a surprise, you know, continually communicate as much as we can. And I think then you'll get more people on board. But I just hear lazy statements like, oh, people hate change.
Yeah.
I'm not completely convinced about that. It's when just the communication may need to improve.
Well, there's just this, I don't know the source of this, so I will describe it, but there's that brilliant little cartoon. Yeah, I've put my name to it. Brilliant little cartoon of someone on a lectern speaking to a group of people saying, who wants change? And everybody has their hand up.
Yeah.
And then the next cartoon is who wants to change? And no one puts their hand up.
Yeah.
So we want change, but we don't want to necessarily change in what we do and how we behave.
Yeah.
And that for us is where we direct the change. You know, we come in with that, okay, I'm going to support you to make the changes that you may need at a kind of skill and behavior level to allow for that to happen.
Yeah.
You know, so everybody wants a change to happen, but nobody wants to necessarily do it.
Yeah. No,
or be the change. You know, that's that, you know, kind of, it's almost become a, you know, too much of an overdone statement, but be the change, right? Nobody wants to think about, well, I don't want to change how I speak in a room. I don't want to change how I think about that. I don't want to change how I make decisions.
Yeah,
well, then
me.
It does not change. Yeah, it's just me. It drives me mad, that statement.
But I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier. When we talk about, oh, it's just me, it goes back to that conversation of, have you, as an individual, gone through the thought process to what you really believe in that situation? Mm. And I often, when people disagree, they haven't thought it through.
No.
So they go, here's my bomb, and then I'll sit back. When actually, tell me about your thinking, which is what you guys do. You challenge that thinking, and you realize that it's not been formulated. So the best thing in that situation is to say, go away and think about it.
Yeah.
And then come back to me when you've thought this through and come to an opinion that may be completely opposite to ours, but at least we know why you got there or how you got there.
Exactly. Come in, you know, that with that. And we, you know, when we work with groups, we work on a real decision. So it's not an in theory. No. It's not an in theory process. It's right, we'll bring to the table the thing you are either avoiding or you can't make a decision on, or you're finding it more difficult, or whatever it is, bring it into the room and show up with your thinking. You know, we won't let you off the hook, you know, on that, but we will give you the tools and the techniques and the skills whilst at the same time making the decision that is live for you.
I mean, obviously we talk about change, and we talk certainly in organisation. What's sort of like the biggest pivot you've seen in someone's change? Where they've been in that environment, have been vehemently against something, and then almost come, whether they allow time and rode with it, or have you got an example of that where?
God, I love that.
Their thinking has been almost, they go, not I told you so, but they're like, you know, I'm glad I stuck with it. I'm glad I went with it, because actually we've ended up in a better place.
Yes, I think the one that's coming to mind, there's probably another one that will sit behind this, but the first one that's coming to mind is working with a startup. And again, I'm going to quote Danny Morris from the previous session that you did, but he talked about startups. He talked about, I think he got a quote from one of his clients saying, startups don't starve, they drown.
Okay.
And we were working with a startup and they were properly stuck, because the energy of the startup has started to dissipate into the everyday, the running of, the getting bigger, all of those things. And the FD said to us afterwards, we made more progress in that day with you than we had done in 6 months.
Wow.
We made more progress. Now, he didn't say I changed my mind. He didn't say I, you know, had a light bulb moment. But what they did was make quicker movement towards the decision they were trying to make. They had a very clear outcome that they wanted to get to. They made more progress in a day. And that's down to them. We give them the tools, but they have to apply it.
Yeah.
In the room.
Yeah.
We can't force them to. So that's, he showed up.
You don't make the decision for them. No.
Yeah, he showed up. He came in and, the four of them were willing to get uncomfortable on what they needed to talk about and willing to try something new. And, that was the outcome. That was, what he said, which is brilliant. It's amazing for us to see that happen.
And I think that's the thing. There's certain things, like I experienced it when we did the 4-day work week and I first brought it to the table. It was like, how are we going to do our work? How are we going to get this done? And it was like, well, this is a process. We've not done this before. There's not many people doing it. We're going to have to roll with it and go through the nuances and how that might work. And we're in a situation whereby in this month it's 4 years since we've been doing it. So now when people talk to me, I can say, well, have you thought about this and this? Because I have the experience of going through it. Like the month of May with the bank holidays and stuff, that's when we launched because it was already a 4-day work week anyway. But it took time, and it took time for people to get involved and work it out. But I didn't have, although the decision in some respects was made, but how it worked took time.
Yeah.
With extra bank holidays, Christmas, holidays in the first like July and August, we had to figure those things out because we just didn't know until we did it.
Yeah.
And it's like going remote. There's going to be a whole load of things that we're having to learn, that nuances that everyone knows how to work in an office, so to speak. Remote's a little bit different, right? So it's how do you deal with that? How do you check in with people and stay connected?
Yeah.
So I think it's as long as the team around you are happy to run with that change and are happy to talk and they've got the platform to discuss and whatever. I mean, it's a healthy environment, and I love the fact is that as long as we're making progress.
Yes.
But it always reminds me of a statement many years ago. A couple of years ago, we were walking through the woods, and we parked the car and we're walking through the woods, and we're like, I kind of knew where we were headed. Yeah, I kind of knew that it's that way. And we've been walking for about 45 minutes, and then the doubts start creeping in. Are we going the right way, Dad? Do you know where you're going? And I remember Taylor saying to me, he said, Dad, do you know where we're going? And I said, as long as we're going forward, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
And it was weird because you say it, and then afterwards it goes, oh, that's quite profound. And that's one of the things. As long as we're moving forward, we don't know where fully the destination is. As long as we're moving forward and not backwards.
Yes.
Then that's half the thing. So it's always stuck with me, that conversation with my youngest. It's like, as long as we're going forward, it'll be all right. And it was funny because we got within about 5 minutes of where we were, and it's a big tower. It's like Tyndale's Monument, and we were walking through the woods there, and I think Claire broke rank and said, that's it, I'm going this way. So she starts walking down on the right-hand side, and we all walk left, and then we see the thing go, oi, and Claire had to turn around and come back around and walk through. So it's quite funny. I said, see, we knew what we were doing. We were in the right place. And I think sometimes you will get people that break rank, but it was just funny. It was like that constant thing was, as long as we're moving forward and we're doing it for the right reasons, we're making progress. It's not about perfection.
Yes.
Then we're in a really good space.
Yeah, I think that's, so we talk about, and it's not the same expression, but we talk about, all progress begins with a brave decision, and you don't know if it's the right decision. You just know it's a decision. It's the right decision with hindsight. That's the only way you can. Yeah. That's the only way you can know. But progress Progress begins with that brave decision, that brave choice, and not making a decision is also a decision. We know that, right? So sitting in stasis is also a choice.
Yeah.
But people get fed up with that, but they don't necessarily know how to shift from that.
Yeah. So indecision is a decision.
It's
in
a decision
100%.
in itself. Yeah. Saying not doing anything is a decision. But yeah, no, I think it's fascinating, and I think the thing that we see, you asked me the question about kind of, have you seen people, pivot or do something different? And I think there are individual examples of that for me. And I'll come back to the expression I used earlier, which is just magic. It's magic to see it when it happens. And I know that feeling of, I was able to say that out loud and it didn't break me or the person in front of me, and actually it was uncomfortable, but it ended up in a better place as a result, or a different place as a result. And I think that's, there's power in that. There's real strength in that.
Absolutely. Well, how would someone get in touch with you if they want to? They've got their team and they've got difficult discussions.
Well, we've got a fantastic website, obviously.
Awesome.
wearebrave.co.uk. We are on LinkedIn under the same name.
Yeah.
And Instagram is We Are Brave Rebels. So those were
Excellent.
there. Yeah, We Are Brave Rebels or wearebrave.co.uk. So that's
well,
us.
It's been awesome to have you, Sara.
Yeah,
and I'm
good
sure
time.
we're gonna have more conversations and get you back on the podcast, and also your business partner Ree. We'd love to get her on as well.
Yeah, great.
But I'm sure a lot of people have got some really good, valuable content to help them on their brave journey. So thanks so much.
Thank you. That's great. No, it's been brilliant. And I was really nervous doing this to start. So you've made it really easy. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Purpose People podcast. You can follow us online. You can like and subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow us on Apple, Google, Amazon, and Spotify. And if you see any clips on our Reels, which is on Instagram or Facebook, or even on TikTok, please give it a like, please give it a share, and please tell your friends. We'd love for you to take part in the Purpose People questionnaire that is also through our website at creation.co.uk. And hopefully you can find yourself living a life on purpose.